Let's start. Maybe the undergrounds are hopefully coming in big numbers. I'm very proud to introduce my old friend Toshi Kono to you. I know Toshi since 39 years. He's a lawyer. He's occupied. His main occupation is law. His hobby is music, and he is an international figure. He speaks English, French, Italian, very, very good German. I know no other non-German who speaks so well like Toshi. And he's professor for international private law in Kyushu University in Japan. International private law is connected with keeping up important buildings. He was engaged in keeping up one of the oldest Japanese harbor cities, which was going to be destroyed. That was your first engagement. And to tell everything he had done would last for hours. But as a matter of fact, shortly before the Cathedral of Notre-Dame burned down, he became president of ICOMOS, which is the most important organization for keeping up important buildings, do it in an international, give it into a national scale. And one story I have to tell you before he will start. He once told me he had to go to Bhutan, a small country in the Himalaya, and there was a cloister which was over 1,000 years old. And they rented out from the cloister to the local administration a few hundred square meters since 600 years. And now both institutions wanted air conditioning in balconies in a building of 1,000 years. Imagine building balconies and air conditioning on San Giovanni in Laterano, which is much younger. So these are the topics where Toshi is asked, because he has the enthusiasm for the arts, for the beauty, and he has the rationality, the thinking of lawmakers have to have. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas, for your too nice introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today. Today I chose the topic, the Notre-Dame. When the Notre-Dame was heavily damaged by the fire 2019, I was the president of ICOMOS. ICOMOS is the abbreviation of International Council of Monuments and Sites. And ICOMOS is one of the advisory bodies of UNESCO, especially for the World Heritage Matters. And so we played a pretty important role for the World Heritage business. And the Notre-Dame is, of course, a part of the World Heritage in Paris. So and then it was just completed the last December, so I thought that it could be pretty topical. So let me start. So this is the outline of my talk today. First, I explain a little bit about the history of Notre-Dame, and the second is the incidents, and then the restoration, reconstruction, and then intangible cultural heritage, and then the current state. I was there last week, so I took some pictures and I'd like to share it with you. And then a few slides to compare the case with other cases. So the Notre-Dame was the construction was started in the 12th century, and it started from the eastern part, and gradually it progressed to the east, to the west. So it took about 80 years to build the foundational part. So it looked like this. And then by 13th century, the two bell towers were completed. And then the the transept was added also in the 13th century. The wooden spire, who built it is not known today, and it was much shorter than the spire that we know. Although the foundational parts was completed, then this is constantly the modification and addition were made. So the first architect's name appeared in a record is Jean de Chelles, and then of course he didn't see the completion of the foundational part. And the big work was added by the Raymond de Temple, and then more or less the building of the Notre-Dame we know which was completed. And since then to the 18th century, from an architectural point of view, not much was added, but the inside it was pretty much different at that time from the cathedral that we know now. So this is the late 18th century. As we don't see that, the oil paintings exhibited in the hall, but it was the case at that time. And this is the late 17th century interior of Notre-Dame. I show you the current cathedral later, pictures of the cathedral later, but it looks pretty different now. And also, as you see, the glasses were white glasses because the priests wanted to have more light in the cathedral, so they eliminated the colored stained glasses. Well, the Notre-Dame, so the Notre-Dame became important, but let me this way. Okay. So Notre-Dame became very important. So the ceremonies took place. Important state ceremonies took place. The good example is the coronation of the Napoleon. So it took place here, and then the Notre-Dame could accommodate hundreds of people to attend the ceremony. And then the contract was signed between the Catholic Church and then the states. So that's the separation of the religion and then state was established, but still the state used the cathedral for a very important role. And this fact, from the viewpoint of the French history, there are other important cathedrals like Reims for the coronation, or the Saint-Denis, but the Notre-Dame as a cathedral in the capital, the fact that it is located in a capital played a very important role. So it's still the politically important events take place in this cathedral. And the cathedral was heavily damaged during the French Revolution. And it was not allowed, the cathedral was closed for 3 years, and it was not allowed to use the cathedral as a place for worship. And even it was reopened, the cathedral was used as a temple of rationality, so that the Catholics were allowed to use only a part of the building in the northern part. So through these events, the cathedral was in a horrible condition. And there was a serious discussion if the cathedral should be demolished. But then there was sort of a group of people who supported to maintain the cathedral, heavily influenced by the Romanticism. And this person, Victor Hugo, played a very crucial role to save Notre-Dame. Without him, probably the cathedral would have been demolished. He wrote, as you know, the famous work Notre-Dame de Paris, and in that piece he praised the beauty of the building, importance of the medieval architecture. So he actually also criticized the vandalism which took place in the cathedral, so that he actually played a very crucial role. And then the state decided to maintain the cathedral, and then organized a competition for the restoration, large-scale restoration. And these two gentlemen here won the competition. And Lassus and Viollet-le-Duc. The Lassus passed away shortly after the competition. So de facto, the Viollet-le-Duc took over the entire project. And his approach, he believed in the importance of medieval architecture, but at the same time, he had a very strong view about his medieval image. And these are one of the conditions of the competition: restore the important parts of the buildings and reconstruct, for instance, reconstruction of the large windows, reinforce the iron reinforcement of the south gables, and et cetera, et cetera. So that was a very large-scale restoration. And at the same time, he brought these colored stained glasses back to the cathedral. He rebuilt the spire. The spire was, as I said, shorter, and also in a pretty bad condition, because the winds, strong winds, affected the stability of the spire. So he reconstructed it, but he argued that in Paris, the spire must be higher. It gives a bigger presence, and he did it. And also, as you see here, he put interesting figures. You may know a little bit monster-like creatures, or the saints, and he created his medieval cathedrals by adding these figures to Notre-Dame. So the Notre-Dame we knew before the fire was the Notre-Dame sort of recreated by Viollet-le-Duc. From today's philosophy, or today's approach of heritage conservation, or conservation of historic buildings, Viollet-le-Duc's approach has been heavily criticized. So adding something by the conservation architects today it's a taboo. It's very strictly, let's say, controlled. But at his time, it was well, he's done that. Well, there are a lot of stories about himself, but I don't go into that detail. Well, these are the figures that he added. And one of these saints, people say that looks like him. So he put himself on one of the roofs. And there's an interesting story about the restoration this time, but I'll come back maybe afterwards. But please remember that it's one of the saints look like him. And this is the his medieval images. And okay, so but the Notre-Dame was probably one of the most famous cathedrals in the world, and probably one of the most frequently visited historical monuments. And it was, for me, a big shock to know that the smoke came out from the cathedral on the April 15th, 2019. And how it happened is still unknown, not yet clearly identified. But apparently it was around the foot of the spire, and because there was sort of restoration, for the restoration, the metal structure was added, and apparently from that area the smoke came out. But as the alarm was installed, and alarm rang once, and the person in charge of the security went to the spot, but he didn't find anything at the time. So 30 minutes later, the alarm rang again, and he went back. Then it was already sort of too late to extinguish by himself. So he called the fire station, and they came, but it was, the roof is from medieval period. So the wood it's called la forêt. It's looked like a very complex forest. It's of course completely dry timber, so that it's very difficult, and also it is like a maze. You don't know which way you should go. So it was extremely challenging for those who dealt with this fire. And this is sketch made by firefighters. The French firefighters, and especially the firefighters in Paris and Marseille, they belong to the military. They only in two cities, these firefighters belong to the military, and they're extremely well disciplined, extremely well trained, and they were so well trained that they could immediately make this sketch on site. This was made on site. And you see here the wind comes from the south, and the description is also at the same time made. So based on that, they had to make a strategy where to tackle. And if I understand correctly, they when they went up, they decided. They identified that the roof they can't save anymore. So the target was to save the two bell towers. If two bell towers would collapse, then the entire building would collapse. So that was the strategy. And And until I think it started late afternoon on the April 19th, and there was smoke until midnight. By midnight, the fire was extinguished, but there was still smoke coming out. So this was the pictures immediately right after the fire. That was before the fire. So the spire was completely gone, and in this part you see I don't know if it works. Here maybe. You know, the roof is completely gone. It's also here, which is the big hole here. It was very difficult was that this scaffolding was also melted. It's a pretty complicated situation at the time. So this is the aerial view of the roof. So you see that there's a big hole here. I'm sorry, the big hole here. Big hole here, and then the truss above the vault was completely gone. You see still here. You see still the rest of the truss, but this is practically speaking is all gone. This is a picture from another cathedral to give you a little bit image how the forest would look like. So these are from Saint Michael from Cluj-Napoca in Romania. This cathedral was built maybe about 100 years or 150 years later than the Notre-Dame. But it's also the big cathedral. So the truss looked like this, and then the vault from above looked like this. Another pictures of the disaster. I'll go rather quickly. And so this is a transept part. You see the big hall. And it's really a horrible situation. This is from above. Well, the president Macron came to the site on the same evening, and he immediately declared that we will rebuild within 5 years. He declared on site, and. Well, I tell you a little bit sort of the story after this 5 years and why 5 years. But so he made a commitment to rebuild it. The problem was 2 days after, the prime minister, not the president, but the prime minister said that we will organize a competition. So competition implied that it would be open to the architects. So the architects, a lot of architects started to promote themselves by introducing their original ideas. And on the left one, this is probably the one of the modest ones, one of the modest ones. And this on the right hand side, this is a very, very artistic approach. Another one was to put let's say swimming pool. So there's a lot of ideas, self-promotion, etc., etc. ICOMOS is the group of experts of heritage conservation. So from the viewpoint of heritage conservation, so these ideas are just unacceptable. Okay, so as soon as these ideas were published, I started to receive hundreds of emails from my colleagues from all over the world. Please stop it. Please stop it. It was indeed a very worrisome situation. And I heard that the reason why the Prime Minister mentioned the competition was that the President Macron's wife is very close to architects. And we guess that there might be some lobbying from architects. And then the argument is that, look, Louvre, Mr. Pei made a beautiful pyramid. Why not on Notre-Dame? So that was a sort of an argument, and there was a lot of debates ongoing. Anyway, so he since the president declared that it will be rebuilt, it must be rebuilt within 5 years. Of course, it's an enormously expensive event, expensive project. So how to collect money was a big issue, but surprisingly, from all over the world, lots of offers started to arrive, and one of the richest people in France immediately offered the billions of dollars and small donations and from in Europe and also outside of Europe. I remember when I visited the church in Romania, the cathedral in Romania. The Cluj-Napoca is a tiny Romanian city, and the Cluj-Napoca city made a donation for the restoration of Notre-Dame, and experts in Cluj-Napoca were furious because they give money to France but not to us. So that implies a very, very complicated situation, and in fact. That sort of criticism occurred pretty soon after the fundraising event started. So this is over here, Notre-Dame, de la mobilisation de feu de flamme. So a lot of money are arriving to Notre-Dame, but for the poor, nothing. And in fact, at that time, there was a social movement called Yellow Mist Movement. That was spread all over France. It's not violent. It's not violent, but it was very quiet, but very, very sort of strong protest from the socially weaker, the people in a socially weaker position. And so here in the placard, they say that the millions of euros for the Notre-Dame and how about for the poor. So that was the social background, and so Yellow Vest movement. Actually, the President Macron was very busy in dealing with these social movements. So on that day, the April 19th, he was scheduled to give an important speech about this, how the state would deal with these movements. But he canceled that event, and then he rushed to the Notre-Dame Cathedral. So it was very politically and socially not simple events. Anyway, more than 1 year later, all of a sudden, the French government declared that the Notre-Dame will be restored just before, like before the fire. So there's no sort of open debate. There was no, let's say, even rumor. Even if we wanted to know what the French government wants to do with the Notre-Dame. We didn't know, but all of a sudden it was so declared. I explained that when the interesting ideas were presented by the different architects, there was a criticism within ICOMOS. So as a president of ICOMOS at that time, I felt that I need to do something. I need to do something, and I met the president of French ICOMOS. So it is a sort of national committee in France. And I had a very interesting discussion with him, and the conclusion of our discussion was not to do any action right now. It's better to stay quiet. The reason is, as I said, that it is a very politically complicated situation, and it is so political that if ICOMOS would say something pro-conservation or against the new ideas, then somewhere from the presidential circle may say that, okay, ICOMOS, no thank you. ICOMOS, we don't need ICOMOS. That would be a pretty bad situation for heritage conservation, because we have ICOMOS France as very important people. ICOMOS France has very important experts on the heritage conservation, and more than half of the chief conservation architects of the French monuments, national monuments, are ICOMOS members. So if they would be excluded, then it would be very, very complicated for France as well, and for ICOMOS as well. So we decided to stay quiet. So we don't know how they decided, but I assume that the French experts quietly, not to make the big noise, but quietly talk to the different stakeholders. But anyway, so the decision was made. The goal is to restore the cathedral as it was just before the fire. So at an early stage, before this decision was made after 1 year, of course, you had to do a lot of urgent measures. So I show some pictures. This was the scaffolding after the fire. And removing the scaffolding was a big challenge because it was melted. It was melted, but it sustained the remaining building as well. If you take off the scaffolding, the building would collapse. So it was a very complicated situation. And so they put a lot of frames with wood. Otherwise, when strong wind comes, anytime the building could collapse that way. So they put a lot of frames and beams, yes, so that can be recoverable. And then the stone statues were removed. Again, this was the for supporting. I can show you again later. The statues were carefully wrapped and removed. But later they found out that some statues were too fragile to restore. So they had to make new statues completely. This is an interesting picture. This is right after the fire. You see the cross there. It survived. It survived. And some religious people thought that, this is the miracle. This is the miracle. And so and also some people started to sell debris as a relics, yes, it's religious relics. And they found out that the one debris offered on the internet was a fake. There's a lot of stories online. And over here, you see the robot is collecting the garbage, the debris, because at the early stage, it was not possible for human beings to enter because the roof of the Notre-Dame was made with lead. And it melted, and it became sort of powder, and you never know where it is. So until it is cleaned up, it was not possible for people to enter. That's why they used the robot. So they put also these wooden frames and beams, and they built the depot to store the statues. Luckily, they have treasure in the cathedral, but the people were so well trained that they successfully took all treasures out from the cathedral before the fire got worse. But as you see that these statues were partly very heavily damaged. Okay, so they had to remove scaffolding at the same time reinforcing the building. And this is from inside. You can't identify what it is. And who administers this entire project? They establish a special body called Établissement Public, specifically in charge of the conservation and restoration of Notre-Dame Cathedral. And as the top or the head of this organization, the President Macron nominated the former general, the military person. I once visited him in his office, and he had an office in the presidential palace. So I went to the Élysée, Palais Élysée, and to explain about the situation and exchange the views and so on. And he said that I'm a military person, so I have a large voice. But don't be afraid. So this was his start. And I think with his strong leadership, I think the restoration work was completed in December last year. He was extremely strong personality. Once the conservation architects were saying this and saying that, then he gave a press conference. Architects should shut up. It was a very straightforward message from the general. Of course, some people were very much offended, but that was very strong top-down approach. Interesting project is this Chantier Scientifique Notre-Dame de Paris. So they organized a researchers group, horizontally organized throughout France, and for 8 main subjects to contribute to the restoration of Notre-Dame: stone, wood, metal, glass structure, acoustic, digital data, and interesting is the social emotions and mobilization. So not only the building itself, but its social impact was also the target of this group. So there are lots of the articles were published, and also, but at the same time, they contributed to the restoration. The reconstruction. Well, what is the difference between reconstruction and restoration? Restoration, you could see that still some material are there, but you reinforce it or you change a part of it. But if you see the cathedrals as a whole, of course, only the partial damage, big but partial damage. But if you see the roof only, then completely gone. And the spire is completely gone. So that part, you need to reconstruct with new materials. So this has nothing to do with, this is the reconstruction. So I think after the World War II, I think in Europe, this is probably the largest case of reconstruction. The Europe suffered a lot during 2 world wars, and so the debate about the reconstruction was not that so active in Europe, in my view, until this instance. So that how to reconstruct, how to let's say explain this construction method was adopted. So they seriously discussed, and well, this is so the important thing is documentation. Important thing is how is this documented? How is it recorded? And there's a research about the truss, for instance. It is individual piece, but also they identify that there are typologies. There are different type of trusses. So in order to reconstruct as a cultural heritage, you have to follow this. You can't simply replace with a totally new designs and new structure. So you have to follow this approach. And so this research was done manually by 3 experts, also NICOMOS members, and so this first they identify which type of truss was where, and then they made this. And about the spire, luckily the Viollet-le-Duc built a model, and also he left very detailed records. These records are available. So they followed the Viollet-le-Duc's approach. The vault was heavily damaged, as you see that there's a big hole, and they carefully analyzed, and then they identified that the large part of vault was also in a very bad condition, and also the tons of waters were poured. So they had to carefully examine, and also they collected stones. They collected some stones, and some stones are not usable anymore. So they have to use the new stones. So they needed woods or the timber for the roof, and then the stones, and also they needed the lead. Well, this is also from historical documents. They follow this. So they collected the stones and reassembled that way to how to support the arch, but they couldn't use all of them. So they had to bring a new stone. So this is the more scientific analysis of the stones involved. And to reconstruct the arch, of course after the World War II, the know-how was lost. So they had to look for information from other cathedrals. So that was another cathedral, and then they found these pictures. It was damaged like this. Sorry, this is a German title is still there. Well, they used this opportunity to clean the side chapels. in Notre-Dame, there are I don't know how many I forgot how many. There are a number of side chapels, and they were not in a let's say they were not restored for years. So they decided to clean. Therefore the chemical analysis is conducted. The stained glasses were taken and cleaned separately. They were taken and cleaned separately. I said that the new stones are needed. When the Notre-Dame Cathedral was built, the stone was obtained from a quarry in Paris, but it was not possible to get it in Paris. But they did a search that they found some quarries in France with the same, let's say, same layers, so that de facto the quarry is from a different place, is a different place, but the stone is the same layers. So they claim that therefore the material is the same. Oak trees, they had to identify which oak trees can be used to build a truss. They use a drone. And they identify which trees can be used. And a good story is that a lot of municipalities in France donated the trees as a participation, or the contributory participation in the project. So these works were organized by conservation architects and also the Ministry of Culture, but those who really build is the carpenters. So these carpenters' skills and techniques are considered very important, because these traditional skills ensures the authenticity of the building. From France, there are two important, let's say, intangible cultural heritage elements on the representative list of 2003 UNESCO Convention. A 2003 UNESCO Convention is for the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. Intangible cultural heritage is typically traditional dances or traditional songs, which can be lost very easily. So how to maintain the tradition and then transmit to the next generation, that was the concept behind. And over here, both are related to building techniques. One is compagnonnage, another was a trait de charpente. The compagnonnage, this is the carpenter's training tradition. The carpenters travel from one site to another for several years, and they were trained in a different sites using the traditional techniques. And this tradition exists over centuries. And this is traité de charpente, is another training for carpenters. The carpenters have to read this documents, and this is a two-dimensional documents, and they have to make a 3D structure. So on the other hand, they also need to draw make a drawing, and so the carpenters are trained to connect between two-dimensional documents and the three-dimensional structure, and this training exists also over centuries in France. And so they say that thanks to these traditional techniques and the same materials, the authenticity of the building is ensured, although it reconstructed. So this is the logic. So this is how to how to cut the trees. They don't use the chainsaw or modern equipment. They simply use axes like this one, as it was practiced in medieval period. And this is the trial. This one is a trial. I'm sorry. How they wanted to know how long it would take to make this truss. So that was a collaboration between architect students of the Chaillot and also the carpenters, young carpenters. So they identified that in order to make truss, one truss, how many days they would need it. But there's a demonstration just in front of the Notre-Dame. Well, there's maybe I skipped this. There's a place, Guédelon, where you can build yourself the wooden houses, applying the medieval techniques. So this seems to be the only place where you can learn how to build the medieval houses. But I skipped this one, and then I was invited to join a team to visit the Notre-Dame, still under restoration work on December 6, 2022. As you see that you have to change the clothes completely, and then you have to take shower afterwards, because even 2022, you never know how your body might be polluted. So this is the inside. This is the altar. This is the foot of the spire. The foot of the spire. So you see how large this spire is. The human beings is there, and this is just a foot. So it is. And still, this part was the restoration was done. Restoration was finished, and that was the big rose window in the facade. So I had a privilege to see it so closely, but it's probably the last time. And these are the pictures of Notre Dame. Actually, I visited last week. As you see, it's very, very clean, very white, very white. And this is a transept part. So this is where the big hole was made. It's completely recovered. This is a cross from the behind and from the front. This is the organ. So the organ was not damaged, but it was polluted. Therefore, they took parts and then cleaned every single piece, and they reassembled there. And they have to see how the acoustic would be influenced by the reconstruction or not. So the Notre-Dame has the choir, and also they have an organist, and they will advise how it is. And this is one of the side chapels, very beautifully cleaned. Well, so these are the very quick overview of what happens and then what is now. just for let's say the food for thought, I put some slides additional, and the biggest challenge for the Notre-Dame reconstruction is the authenticity. If the reconstructed Notre-Dame passes the authenticity test or not. This authenticity test is usually assessed in accordance with the Venice Charter of 1964, and another document is 1994. The Venice Charter, well, the authenticity test is categorically refused for intangible cultural heritage. It is a very interesting phenomena. Musicologists or anthropologists, they say that intangible cultural heritage, traditional dance and songs, they are not frozen. They are not fixed. So if the bearers of traditions wanted to change, they are allowed to change. So authenticity is not categorically acceptable, they say. Very interesting thing is that the traditional building techniques is an intangible cultural heritage. And as I said, this ensures the authenticity of material heritage. So if the intangible traditional building technique is totally changed, how would it affect the authenticity of material heritage? This is not discussed yet so much. So in other words, the dialogues between the let's say conservation architects and the anthropologists, musicologists, dialogues don't take place yet properly, in my view. So this is the field where the scholars need to further explore. In the case of Notre-Dame, it has also an aspect that this was a reconstruction in post-trauma context. Please think about the cathedrals damaged in Ukraine after the bombing by Russia. If they want to reconstruct, lose authenticity if they don't have the material or traditional materials and traditional skills, or not. So this is another politically pretty sensitive issue, how to deal with this post-trauma context. And in fact, there are cases, I don't know if you know the Bamiyan Buddha. In Afghanistan, there was the huge stone Buddha, and that was bombed and destroyed by Taliban. And after that event, the valley, it is Bamiyan Valley, was inscribed as World Cultural Heritage. So after the destruction, now Afghan government wants to reconstruct the Buddha. Should it happen or should it not happen? This is related to this authenticity test and also the post-trauma issue. And on top of that, the Afghan government currently is as a Muslim government. Do they really need a Buddha? So this is another cultural debate. This needs another cultural debate. But anyway, so this is pretty complicated issues. Difficult thing is that under the World Heritage Convention, we have operational guidelines, paragraph 86. And it says, in relation to authenticity, the reconstruction of archaeological remains on historic buildings or districts is justifiable only in exceptional circumstances. Reconstruction is acceptable only on the basis of complete and detailed documentation and to no extent on conjecture. So the World Heritage Convention and operational guideline takes a pretty strict approach about reconstruction. So we have this very strict normative document, but the socially or culturally there's a strong need. So how to let's say balance these requests? This is still unsolved big question. To conclude my talk, I show some pictures from Japan. Do you know this? This is Roku-onji Temple in Kyoto. And this golden pavilion is probably worldwide famous. And Yukio Mishima wrote also about this temple. Why? Because it was burned. It was burned 1950. It was burned by a monk of that temple. So now the pavilion that we know now here is a reconstruction. And after this fire, the government made a very deep, intensive research, and they decided to reconstruct. This was actually the building which was lost. This picture was taken in 1904. So this building was burned in 1950. So to reconstruct this one, the question was, it is not gold. It's not golden. So they made a very scientific analysis, and they found that in the wood they found a slight element of gold. So they concluded that building was gold plated. But at the same time, you see let's say here, you see the open, doors are open. Here's also open. And you see this also on the picture, you see people there, they are enjoying gardens. But this picture, you see, is completely closed here. Here, closed. So they also made a research, and they concluded that when it was built, there was no open access to the garden. So they came to a conclusion that this access to the garden was made possible after much later than this was completed, and it means that the reconstruction of this building was to go back to the time of original building. So this is different from Notre-Dame. Notre-Dame was going back to the stage where just before the fire occurred. And that was after Viollet-le-Duc changed a lot. Okay, so when we discuss about the reconstruction, so to which period we should go back, this is a very important decision making, because it affects the style, materials, and then many other things. So this was a but the Japanese government seems to go back to the original. This is my impression. Okay, so this was a document that they identified, they discovered. This is the document made in 1881, and as you see that, this no access to the garden. Mm-hmm. So they decided to follow this approach. Okay, so I think this is the last slide. This is traditional, I mentioned traditional techniques, buildings techniques, and it is still applied in Japan. This is the roof making, This one is replace a part of the timber. Compared to the stone buildings, the wooden buildings would not last for 300, 400 years. They have to replace the rotted part. But with this replacement, the building could survive another 200 years. So it takes time. Sometimes the restoration work takes 20 years. The very traditional Japanese technique is the building is, let's say, dismantled, and change the rotted part with a new wood and reassemble. And the percentage of the new wood is probably 15%. So this sort of large-scale restoration work it takes place in every 200 years or something like that. So it is a very expensive project, so that you can't do that often. Minor work, yes. Minor repair work, yes. But the dismantling and the reassembling, and then keeps the original wood as much as possible. This is actually the traditional technique for Japan. And this method is probably not known in Europe, but this has been very much well practiced and pretty well accepted in other countries. Okay, so this was the last slides, and thank you very much for your kind attention. And if you have questions, I'm more than happy to. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for taking out the time to give us a dive into this. One of the things I'm curious about, particularly with the Notre-Dame, is now after the fires, what measures have they taken to avoid that from happening again? Like, did they change things in, I don't know, whatever procedures they have, or maybe security checks, but just to prevent that from happening again? Do you know if there's anything?
I think the big shock for them, it was that although they installed alarm, it didn't properly work.
Yes.
So they need to. I think they should have checked it more frequently and regularly if this alarm works or not. So I think it can be said to other heritage buildings. Once the big instance occurs this way, then of course it's very, very destructive. So prevention is very important. So in order to prevent, you install the proper system and then test it on a regular basis. And I think that they introduced the modern alarm system.
Okay.
And also but security check, I wasn't sure if there was no security check at the entrance. I think they checked only the reservation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have you been to Notre-Dame after the completion? You went?
Yeah, I wasn't able to visit it before the fire, unfortunately, but I was there in December on the last day of its octave.
I see. Excellent.
And it was fantastic to see it all. I mean, like you were saying, it's very, very clean.
Yeah.
Like every surface is like either white or very brightly colored.
Yeah.
I thought it was beautiful, but
It is.
I was wondering what your thoughts are actually. I've heard like a common critique with restoration is that Notre Dame was characterized by like its darkness. Like, do you think that the reconstruction should have respected that present character? Because you spoke about how the government of France decided to restore the Notre-Dame to its conditions immediately before the fire. But by the intensive cleaning, they moved it back to, well, I would say it was like the completion by Le Duc. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. but in the sense that in the case of Notre-Dame, I think the cleaning of walls and side chapels, not only for, let's say, not only for the recreate the beauty, but also it was necessary for the health reasons, because the roofs were melted, and then
The lead.
the lead was everywhere. So I think that they use that occasion on that they use this occasion for cleaning both purposes. But I know that sort of the criticism. But yeah. But the heritage buildings have a lot of layers. So if we go back to the original, then maybe as I said, the side chapels were added much later. So if you go back to the very original stage, for the building restoration, then that time there was no side chapel. And if we go back to the period where the side chapel was made, but these side chapels were not added at the same time. So it is a lot, the evolutionally built in a sense. So to which it's not a simple question, I have to say.
Well, I would agree. So over this last summer, I was working at an archaeological site in Greece, and they're facing a similar question at the Sanctuary of the Great Gods on Samothrace. Is the current director, she's interested in the Hellenic period, and so the primary work is done in that period, and what's presented to the public when they visit the park, like what's exposed out of the earth, is of the Hellenic period. But the sanctuary was used over a 1,000-year period, and so it's obviously a different conversation, but a similar one of what do you preserve and present, and what do you dig through for the research? This is complicated, so I appreciate your thoughts on the Notre-Dame.
It's also the question of allowing a building to live. If you have 1,000 years of candles and incense, the stone's going to change color.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
If you install, some of the images you showed were horrifying of the completed work, is all the electric light is completely defeating the windows and the complexity. Just turn those things off. So the building has to have its own. So maybe I'm arguing against myself. If I want to let the building do what it's going to do with candles and incense, let it do what it's going to do with electric light as well. But there's got to be some sense that it's not just this, borrow a phrase from a certain movie, an object in aspect that's just left over from a dinner party and all the guests are long since dead and gone. It's got to have some kind of light.
Well, it is a slightly different example, but the Japanese screen, painted screen, gorgeously painted in 18th century. And when you visit the museums, you see with the spotlight, it's really beautifully, let's say, illuminated. But it was not the case when it was made. So it was installed in a room with candles. But you can't do that with the important cultural property. So there is a project to reproduce the Japanese screens digitally, and they do some finished work by manually. But they make the screen, reproduce the screen digitally, and they lend these copies to schools. And so the schools can exhibit only with candles. So the kids can then see how it looked like in 18th century. So this sort of experience, I think I heard that is a very good reputation from schools. This kind of experience with the lights, and I think this really affects also people's impression, experiences as well.
I have a question about the forests.
Yes.
I go to Paris quite frequently, so
Yeah.
I've been able to follow through all the various phases of the construction. But there's one thing which I haven't quite understood. How did they stabilize such a huge amount of trusses and buttresses and things? Because in the old times, they would never, ever use fresh wood. They would let it age for at least 60, 50, even a century sometimes. So certainly when they did the forest back then in the Middle Ages, the timber that they used to make the structure of the roof was not fresh. Well, here they've been cutting a lot of trees and they cut it very nicely with, as you were showing, with axes manually, everything. So that was beautifully done. But I quite not understanding how they can keep such a complex and massive structure still stabilized if they haven't used any industrial proceeding in drying out the wood like we normally do today. I mean, you can't use, if you want to have a truss made of wood, you have to put in a oven and you have to dry it out with electric heat, with some kind of heat and make so that the structure is not moving. Have they done that as far as you know?
I haven't. I asked, but I didn't get a very clear answer. So, but I asked the question. Probably he's not a wood specialist. So, that was also one of the concerns for me. The stone walls are also damaged by fire and water, and then on top of that, they put this heavy trusses and the roofs. So either they reinforced the stones or they made the trusses lighter, or both, or nothing. This is. I think I have to ask my colleagues. Thank you for the question.
Okay, I think time is running. I think we had Toshi answered all the questions. Is there a last question to ask to end the process? No one wants to be.
Just one little finishing. How did they clad the roof this time? Is it lead again?
Yes. Yeah, they made a new roof with lead. So
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much.
thank you very much.